if they're using your device, if they're connecting to your organization, there needs to be a way to securely do that, and you have to implement that. Next up, we're going to talk about operations and incident response. So this is super important. So when things do go left, when shit hits the fan, you got to make sure that people know how to properly respond. We don't just want people running around in circles, crying, sweating, and doing stuff like that. We want to make sure that people know exactly what to do. Now, one of the things to figure out a baseline, how to actually come up with the operational procedures and figure out how to respond to incidents, is something we talked about earlier, is having a proper security assessment, figuring out where the organization is right now and how do we get better at what we need to do. One of the ways that we can do that is by creating a network map and doing a little reconnaissance. So you figure out, okay, how is the actual network set up and how does it actually respond to different stressors, different commands, different things, right? We can do this by using commands such as ping to see, okay, can we actually speak to things on our network and off our network? Let's try traceroute to actually trace the route that data takes. What routers does it go to? Does it drop any information? So you have to actually make a network map, do a little recon, see if any files on the server have been manipulated, see if anybody has access to information that they shouldn't have access to. So you have to implement that security assessment to figure out how secure is the network, how secure are the devices, and to ensure that nobody on that network, nobody in the organization has access to files, folders, information that they shouldn't have, both physically and digitally. To ensure that everybody is on the same page during an incident response, that's when a user training is going to come in, and policies, right? So you have policies in place to ensure that everybody knows what to do. So you have user agreements. So you have somebody sign, hey, you're agreeing to, as a user, this is what you're going to do on the network, this is what you won't do. Also, another step you could take is an acceptable use policy, right? So this acceptable use policy, or AUP, is ensuring that people understand, hey man, this is what's acceptable on our network. This is what's acceptable in our organization. Anything above and above and beyond that, you can get fired, you can have discipline actions, so on and so forth. But you got to have standard operating procedures. You got to have policies in place, and not just for bad stuff, but like I said, when an incident happens, everybody should know, okay, this is who I'll call. I disconnect my computer, I do XYZ, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, just to lessen the blow of whatever incident that is, instead of just letting it run crazy. Whenever something happens, everybody, from the smallest guy to the biggest girl, should know exactly what to do. Now, going along with those are policies that are indicative to incident response. You also have to have procedures in place to mitigate these things. Okay, when something happens, should we contain things? Should we eradicate them? So on and so forth. You should have a policy and steps and procedures to how to mitigate things. Are we going to mitigate things through insurance? Are we just going to avoid certain things? You have to have policies, procedures, and steps in place to mitigate these things. So mitigating risks, mitigating vulnerabilities, super important on the exam, super important in real life. Now, when an incident does happen, depending on how serious it is, depending on what needs to happen, how we're going to wrap up incident response handling is digital forensics. So just like in a crime scene, when somebody gets hurt or something happens, they come, they dust for fingerprints, they try and figure out a timeline, see where you were at, so on and so forth. That's the same thing that happens when a crime happens on the internet. Where were you? What device you were using? What cell phone towers did you ping off of? That way we can triangulate your actual space, or your IP address, where you were. Another thing,